I was told about it. It's like, dude, people there are like, it's going to galvanize. It's just going to make us, trust me, when this stuff happens, it turns us more into, right, we get to fight the world. And that's what they are, man. Eagles football is bully football. The way they get after you on defense, but certainly that offensive line, man, they just beat you down and beat you down and beat you down.
Welcome to the NFL on Fox podcast, presented by Verizon. The NFL, powered by Verizon 5G. I am your host, Dave Helman. We've got a very newsy Tuesday show for y'all. Lot to get into. 2 Monday night games, of course. We'll break all that down later in the show. Also going to talk about the biggest concerns facing some of the biggest contenders in the NFL. It's a conversation born out of the news. Maybe you saw the Detroit Lions absolutely decimated by injury on Sunday, and that news got worse on Monday. Let us into the conversation of what should you be concerned about if you are one of these juggernaut teams gunning for a Super Bowl. What problems might arise? Had a really enlightening conversation with Carmen Vitali of Fox Sports about that. First, though, it is definitely a week with a lot to get into coming out of the weekend. Patrick Mahomes dealing with an ankle injury he suffered in the Chiefs' win against Cleveland. Talked about that with NFL on Fox insider Jay Glazer, as well as several other big news items. Maybe you remember back to Thursday, strange situation with Devondre Campbell, the 49ers linebacker, refusing to go into their game against the LA Rams and the fallout from that situation. A lot to get into on the newsier side of things with Jay. So check out our conversation from earlier on Monday.
All right, Jay, it's one of those weeks where there's some big time news coming out of Sunday. I want to start with the storyline it's going to be dominating the talk all week long, and that's obviously the ankle injury that Patrick Mahomes suffered in the latter half of that win against the Cleveland Browns. It's a short week, and it doesn't get easier after that either because they've got a Christmas game. What's the plan here? What should we be watching with Patrick Mahomes' ankle, and what do the Chiefs do if he's not available?
Well, they're having an MRI at 8:30 this morning, so obviously waiting on the results of that. Their initial thought was high ankle sprain. High ankle sprains normally keep people out several weeks. Patrick Mahomes is not normal. He's had 2 other high ankle sprains. Did not miss any games. He's just different. So when you're dealing with everybody else in the league, you're probably looking at like 3 weeks. Some people, season ender, depending if they need like a tightrope surgery or something along those lines. Patrick Mahomes, he just doesn't miss time. He's just different.
Chiefs, obviously, they're and I get it. When you have this caliber of quarterback, you want to have an experienced backup. Carson Wentz is there for a reason. He's a guy that's played a lot of football in the NFL.
Totally different, man. Not even close. It's not even. We're not talking the same stratosphere here. Yes, they're a good team, but that's a different stratosphere, man.
Of course. But my point is, if you have a competent backup like Carson Wentz, look, I get it. Patrick Mahomes is different, and he's going to do everything that he can to get on the field. But how much thought do the Chiefs give to giving Patrick at least a week to try to get this thing right and maybe get through this Houston game with Wentz before you worry about playing Mahomes?
It's not just that. Patrick has a really good governor on what he can and can't do, and he pushes. And I know a lot of times I got to protect him from himself. Like I said, the dude's just different. How he comes back from certain injuries. There was one a couple of years ago. Should have put him out for the year, and he missed a few weeks. And that Super Bowl run, same thing. High ankle sprain, didn't miss anything. He's just a different cat. The one thing I could say, even with Mahomes, they've just been eking out wins, right? So you go from the greatest quarterback in the NFL, down to Carson Wentz. I don't know if you could still hope to eke out these kind of wins, because a lot of these wins are just Patrick, with his late game heroics that just normal people can't do. One thing is Hollywood Brown. Andy Reid told me yesterday, they're going to hope to have a package in from maybe this week, maybe the week after, but he's really close. Getting a package to say he looked really good. It's just that when you're coming back from that, you got to just get your timing down where I'm not going to say perfect, but got to get his time down a little bit better because you're a little bit hesitant. But, to get another receiver like that back will certainly help them out. But this is playoff time for the Chiefs, right? It's playoff time. So again, I just haven't seen Patrick Mahomes miss time with a high ankle sprain. If that's what it is. Now listen, there may be torn ligaments. I don't know. I haven't gotten word yet on what the MRI results are.
We've done this enough times, and I get it. I mean, we don't know the results for sure, but I'm not going to be surprised if Patrick Mahomes doesn't wind up missing any time. But it is an interesting thought
I'd be surprised
exercise.
if this time.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. It's going to be a hell of
It's
a
different. Listen, certain people have a great relationship with pain. And Patrick's one of those guys.
Saturday game followed by a Christmas game. It's going to be a very interesting week and a half for Kansas City. Let's talk about some news from Thursday night. I know it didn't happen technically over the weekend, but a very rare circumstance where Devondre Campbell just didn't want to go in for San Francisco. Obviously, it led to a lot of criticism from outside the team and obviously from Campbell's own teammates. What's the latest on the situation there? Because there's been some talk about, well, you don't want to cut him and reward him with an opportunity to go somewhere else. Maybe the 49ers suspend him for that. What's
They're
the latest?
suspending him for the rest of the season. I don't know if they're able to do it. So sometimes what you do is you try and suspend guys. They're trying to suspend him for 3 games, but then they have a grievance. The NFLPA has a grievance, and they could, perhaps reverse it, and then you have to decide what you want to do with the guy because they don't want to basically say, hey, let's give him a reward for screwing us over and put him on a playoff team. But let me give you some backstory here also. He wasn't really supposed to be on the team in the first place. And what I mean by that is they thought they had to deal with Eric Kendricks. And then Eric Kendricks has a great relationship with Mike Zimmer. In the very last second, Eric Kendricks decides to, he made an about face and signs with Dallas. So I think at that point, San Fran's like, almost got a little desperate. We need somebody in here until Dre Greenlaw comes back. So they brought him back. But they always told him, here's the deal. When Dre comes back, he is going back in the lineup. So now, fast forward, not even Thursday, Wednesday, they thought something was a little wonky. So they talked to him. Are you good? Yeah, I'm fine. You sure? Yeah. Then that game happens. And they really started seeing it in the second quarter. He was just disconnected from everybody. Didn't want nothing to do with anybody else. They saw there was going to be a problem. Asked him to go in the game. He wouldn't do it. Finally, in the fourth quarter, John Lynch went down there, and he wanted to make sure. Now, listen, John Lynch is a purist, man. And you heard me say on Fox NFL Sunday, those of us who know John Lynch, and then 47 Red. John Lynch is like the most Brooks Brothers wearing, freaking whitest dude in the planet, wearing like sweaters around us. But 47 Red, I know you're not supposed to say this anymore. We will knock you out on the playing field. Right? He's a gold jacket guy. And it's a gold jacket.
Old school. Yeah.
He is. So he goes down there, and I get people who call me after going, oh my God, we've heard you all talk about 47 Red. Mike Tomlin's the one who made this up about 47 Red. He gave him the nickname when they were in the Bucks. And it's just run with us forever. And, so he's talked about it publicly. Rondé Barber's talked about it. Sapp and Brooks, they're all talking about 47 Red. Okay. And 47 Red, because obviously he wore number 47, when he played. And I had people call me saying, oh my God, we heard about this legendary character of 47 Red, but we hadn't seen it. Man, that dude is crazy. Yeah, absolutely, man. He'll fight you before you'll fight him. And that's kind of who you want leading your charge, if that's the culture you want. And he's the one who said, man, you're not going in the game. No. Are you telling me you're not going in the game? No. Get off the field. I mean, he went insane. And, it was so unacceptable because Dre had a pitch count. The player behind Dre banged up or just wasn't playing well. They needed Campbell. That was a playoff game for them. He screwed them. No ands or ifs or buts about it. No other way to look at it. And I think Lynch saved him by kicking him off the field, because if he was still over there and players found out about him, I think there would have been hands laid.
An issue on the sideline, yeah.
Would have been hands laid.
When you think about everything that Niners team has gone through this year, I mean, I was not surprised to see his teammates pull no punches afterward. And that's very interesting, because what we've learned about the Niners is that John Lynch is usually the good cop to Kyle Shanahan's bad cop. So it's very interesting that John Lynch
is 47 Red 8.
Exactly, yeah. I I get it. You definitely you don't want to reward the guy with a shot to be on a playoff team in January, but yeah, I don't know. I hope the Niners can come to some resolution because
Well,
it's
again,
just
they're
a
suspending them all
BS
for games.
situation.
It depends what happens to the grievance now. They're going to try and take back as much money as they can, and rightfully so. It's just, man, I'm all about team, 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 team. I talked to you about mental health.
For sure.
I need my
Yeah.
teams. Last thing I'm ever going to do is screw my teams over. All right, and then people are saying, well, let's just wait. It could be a mental health issue. I talk about mental health more than anything else. Okay, but there's a difference here in mental health and deciding you're going to let your teammates die on the hill without you when you can do something about it.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you about, it's not technically NFL news, but it involves one of the greatest figures in NFL history. Bill Belichick is a college head coach now. He took the North Carolina job late last week.
I don't get it.
I don't get it either, Jay. And even more so,
I don't get
I
it.
don't get it when I saw the news that supposedly his buyout at North Carolina like plummets down to a very
The 1
negligible
million.
amount of money.
It starts at 10 million, it goes to 1 in June. And the reason why they did that is only to take him out of this hiring phase, the NFL. So he can get into the next one if he wants. But I kind of looked at it like, man, Bill, because he also went to look, I think maybe you get to that age, go, man, where do I want to live? Maybe where I want to go enjoy myself. Right. It's more of a quality of life for you. But I think I'm trying to say this the right way, but like I think he just didn't have maybe he just didn't have confidence that anyone was going to go for him. But I think also, and that's the NFL. But you look at colleges, and I want to rag on UNC here, but it's not like they're a powerhouse.
No.
When he could have gone to a powerhouse, but again, maybe it's just I can't criticize someone for doing something that they think are going to improve their lives. I was just very shocked. But the thing I'm most shocked about is college football is the Wild West right now. You had agents run around, and they're not really even agents. They're taking 10% from these kids. It's like a bunch of how runners used to be back in the day. And they're like, I have one college coach I'm friends with who said, man, we were about to lose this receiver the other day. And all of a sudden, to this smaller school, and they're like, well, they're going to give his dad, meals to here. Can you pay for that? They're going to give him hotels here. Can you pay for that? Can you do this? Can you have first class for, the brother and the sister, whatever it is, right? All these crazy things. And it's just the Wild West, and there's nothing that's policing it at this point. And I think that's going to drive Bill absolutely insane unless he out Wild Wests everybody.
Tom Brady joked about it on the show a couple weeks ago, and I think it
Tom
was
and
a
I
joke.
talked about it this week. We couldn't believe it, man. And Gronk, we're all in a text chain, and we're like,
I can't wait to see Bill Belichick the salesman, because you've got to be a salesman to be a good college football
I think
coach.
Gronk, Brady, or Edelman, well, obviously had to be one of the three. They said on our show best to like, picture Bill sitting on someone's couch at their home going,
Yes,
your son should really come to UNC. Like, I just can't picture it. But
I
hey,
can't.
man,
I
if it
can't
makes
see
him
it.
happy, God bless him. I like Bill. God bless him if it makes him happy.
We will see where it goes, and I mean, hey, with the buyout dropping, it won't be this hiring cycle, but I don't know. I guess that opens the door
it
for
may
him to
not be
try
any
again.
because, again, when you're bringing Bill in, it's a whole different culture you're bringing in, and he's already older. And like, hey, usually you want to hire someone because you want him like Mike Tomlin, being there for 18 years, right? It can't happen at his age. You want Sean McVay, where he's going to be there for a long time, right? Or Andy Reid going to be there for a long time, or John Harbaugh a long time. That's not going to happen with Bill.
Jumping back to Sunday, I don't think the Eagles could have drawn up a more perfect response to all of the drama in Philly over the week. I mean, they don't just win, they win big. They get the receivers involved. Jalen Hurts has a fantastic day. What did they do to get everybody back on the same page?
Well, I will tell you this: the drama was way bigger outside the building than inside the building. The first team meeting after Brandon Graham said what he said, Jalen and AJ got up and they're like, man, we're good. Just so everybody here knows we're fine. We dapped each other up like we're good. And then Brandon got up and he apologized for being a distraction. And actually, to his credit, he did more than that. He went personally, apologized. Even to like when I was told like Jeffrey Lurie, like everybody. And Brandon's a great dude. And he just spoke out of turn there. But I was told about it. He's like, dude, people there are like, it's gonna galvanize. It's just gonna make us, trust me, when this stuff happens, it turns us more into, right, we get to fight the world. And that's what they are, man. They're Eagles football is bully football. You know, the way they get after you on defense, but certainly that offensive line, man, they just beat you down and beat you down and beat you down. And the thing that nobody knows, and this is a credit to Jalen, is in the bye week, Brandon Graham actually with Big Dom went to his house and said, hey man, we need you to kind of connect more with everybody here. Right? As a quarterback, you can kind of get lost in that. There's so much other stuff you got to do. And he went out of his way. He met with the offensive line, connected. He met with Sirianni like 3 times or several times. Connect with him. Connected with, like, he went out of his way with Graham, with everybody to connect with them more, saying, okay, I understand there's more to the quarterback position than me just sitting here with the game plan and, making sure I could, throw here and throw there. And they all credit him with doing a great job for it. And it's not out there hey, it's not out there how he's, how good of a job he's done to connect with his teammates more, because quarterback position, it's one part talent, one part dudism, right? Man, you got to be a dude with these guys.
That's such a great way to phrase it. Not just charisma, but dudism. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, longest win streak in franchise history with everything they've accomplished over the last 2 years. That kind of opened my eyes a little bit to just how special this season has been for Philadelphia. And all of a sudden, the number 1 seed is on the table for the Eagles. We'll see how the last 3 weeks go. Jay, love talking to you, man. Catch up soon. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks as always to Jay Glazer for stopping by. And thanks also to Fox Sports reporter Carmen Vitali, who joins me, as she so often does on Tuesdays, for the rest of the show. Going to talk some Monday Night Football, but first we're going to get into our big conversation of the week. And Carm, usually I aim for evergreen topics when we do this, just looking big picture, league landscape, trends, all that fun stuff. We're going to do a very topical conversation today. We're going to talk about the concerns facing the biggest contenders in the NFL this season. Just the 4 big ones, the top 2 seeds in each conference.
Yeah.
No offense to the Steelers and the Ravens and a few other teams, but these are the favorites right now. I would guess it's a good shot the Super Bowl will be comprised from this group. And I'll tell you why it's topical and why I wanted to talk about it.
Okay. Shoot.
I was feeling it on Sunday night, and it's only gotten stronger given the news that's come out about the Detroit Lions. It almost feels like we're having a funeral for the Detroit Lions season.
Yeah.
On Monday morning, heading into week 16 of the season.
I'm really glad you're bringing this up.
It's and I completely understand. So if you're living under a rock, or if you're just not hip on the latest NFL news, we know the Lions got battered in that loss to the Buffalo Bills. We know they've had an injury-plagued season. They lose defensive tackle Aleem McNeil.
That's the biggest one to me.
They lose CB1. Carlton Davis broke his jaw.
Yeah, he was already playing through like a broken thumb too. Like, it just wild.
Could conceivably return late in a playoff run, maybe.
Right.
And then, okay, Aleem McNeil might be the biggest one, but the most noteworthy one among NFL fans,
right?
David Montgomery goes down Monday, finished the game with a torn or a heavily strained MCL on Sunday afternoon. He's done for the year. You lose his 1,100 scrimmage yards and 12 rushing touchdowns, tied for 3rd in the league. It has been a brutal season for the Detroit Lions. And this goes all the way back. So this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the biggest concerns facing the very best teams in the league and whether it's enough to derail a Super Bowl campaign. I'm curious for your take on it, because on Sunday night, I was very down in the dumps about the Detroit Lions and just like, man, how much more can they be expected to overcome? And here as we're recording this, I feel defiant. Like, okay, hey, this is a team that just had a 12-game winning streak snapped. Like, this is still a really good team that's going to get some players back. Like, do we need to bury the Lions right now before Christmas?
No, that's my biggest thing is it's not going to be as easy as it's looked at times this season for the Detroit Lions, but that was always going to be the case as you get into crunch time. Everybody gets hurt along this stretch of the season, the home stretch, and they just came off a game with one of, if not the best team in the league in the Buffalo Bills, with number 17 Josh Allen at quarterback, who can create magic, pure magic out of broken plays.
And did several times.
Listen, these are two of the best teams. I would challenge, though, anybody who is down in the dumps about the Detroit Lions to really take stock from as objective a point of view as you're afforded. If you're a Lions fan, I get it. It's easy to be kind of down with this, but think about what you still have. Most importantly, offensively, this team is averaging the most points per game at 32.8 points per game. That's a full point ahead of the Buffalo Bills, who they just played. This was a very high-scoring game between the two teams, by the way. Even with David Montgomery gone, you have Jahmyr Gibbs in the backfield still, who has, Ben Johnson knows exactly how to use him, the offensive coordinator. Your offensive line, you got Taylor Decker back. That is intact. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown, you have Sam Laporta, and you have Jared Goff playing the best football of his career. That, for any other team, is fine. That's great. That is enough. And especially when you think about the fact that you're going into this stretch where the Lions have Chicago next, and then they have the Niners, and then they have the Vikings.
They wrap up with the Vikings.
The Vikings, that's going to be the toughest, especially if that means something. But the Vikings have already locked up
a playoff spot.
They have a shot at the 1 seed. It's a little bit of an outside shot on the 1 seed, but they still have a shot at the 1 seed. But these are winnable games for Detroit is what I'm getting at. And you're going to be in the playoffs regardless. You could definitely use the bye. So the 1 seed is still in play with all of this. The biggest thing to me hinges on the defense. We've seen Aaron Glenn pull off miracles this entire season, starting with when Aiden Hutchinson went down. That's what is most concerning to me, though, is I mentioned Aleem McNeil. You've had DJ Reader in and out of the lineup. That interior of the defensive line is really what has saved them. That and Brian Branch. And Kirby Joseph. I don't want to slight Kirby Joseph at all.
You make a wonderful point. It's almost like the Lions have an incredible roster. Like, even with all of the losses they've sustained, like Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph still hanging out on that defense. Alex Anzalone potentially returning from the broken forearm. Hopefully. I said potentially. John Kaminsky could return. They haven't had him since training camp. They could conceivably get him back for the playoffs. Like, that's... I think
they're not even ruling out Aiden Hutchinson at this point if they make it to the NFC Championship game.
I think we took it like 2 steps too far.
We sure did.
Because as you pointed out, and I don't want to minimize the loss of David Montgomery, it's a huge bummer.
It is a huge bummer.
If there was ever a team that could withstand it, it sure looks like the Detroit Lions.
You've got a really creative offensive play caller in Ben Johnson that I trust to figure things out. Besides, we know that he can use offensive linemen as weapons. Why not just line him up in the backfield as running backs? You've used him as a receiver this last game. He got a touchdown pass to Dan Skipper, 6'10" Dan Skipper, by the way, the thickest and tallest of excellence. Right then and there. So I don't know, just put in a guard, put in one of your backup guards at running back, see how that goes. I trust Ben Johnson to figure it out.
I am curious what Aaron Glenn's plan to generate pressure will be.
That's why I think Aleem McNeil is the biggest injury that we need to be talking about with the Lions, because I do think that the defense is can I read you off the defensive injuries? Just the defensive injuries right now.
Yeah. Yes,
guys that are out or on IR. Aiden Hutchinson, Aleem McNeil, Carlton Davis, Alex Anzalone, Derek Barnes, Broderick Martin, Khalil Dorsey, Ifeatu Melifonwu. I know I always mess that up. Enos Rakestraw, Emmanuel Mosley. Those are guys that, like,
quite a long list.
At the very least would have been rotational players for you. Most of those guys are starters.
Yeah, it's like 6 starters and 4 or 5 like rotational guys that had a role.
Yes.
in Aaron Glenn's defense.
Yes.
It's not going to be easy. And I don't feel as good about the Lions as I did, say, 3 weeks ago. But the strength of this team, like you just mentioned, it's always been the offense. Since their bye week, by the way, they were one of the teams that had an early bye week.
Yeah, they did.
They had a couple iffy offensive performances in September. Since their bye week, they're averaging 36 points per game.
See, yeah.
So
they were dropping 50 on guys like every other week in the middle of the season.
I don't want to exaggerate too much. I do think running into a Josh Allen or a Philadelphia is going to be a problem probably with this roster as it is. But those matchups are NFC Championship game, Super Bowl types of matchups.
Right.
I don't want to get carried away. So it felt necessary to say this and say, Lions fans, step away from the edge.
Ledge.
Yeah, step away from the edge. This is still one of the 4 best teams in the NFL, potentially better than that. But in the interest of being fair and objective, and I did just mention the Eagles, let's just go through this.
Okay.
Having just given this pep talk to the Lions, I'm looking at the Philadelphia Eagles. I would love to know what you see as their biggest concern, because I struggle to come up with something on paper, to be honest with you.
I honestly, it's the concerns are splitting hairs at this point. And some of them aren't super quantifiable, and some of them are clearly not actual issues. Because if you go back to the beginning of this season, when things got off to a little bit of a rocky start, and there was, reports of friction between Jalen Hurts and the head coach, and then this, that, the other, like vibes just didn't seem good in Philadelphia. Well, then they win 10 games in a row. And then even this last week, when Brandon Graham accidentally let slip that Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown aren't the best of friends off the field or whatever, they came out in a big way. And then you saw that press conference from Jalen Hurts yesterday where he was like, is this what you wanted to see?
Yeah.
After they went off together. I mean, it doesn't seem like any sort of vibe check applies to the Philadelphia Eagles, which is one of, I think, the only criticisms you could have of this team. It doesn't seem to affect their on the field play, which then renders it completely moot. Outside of that, I don't know what's going on with Saquon. No one knows what's going on with Saquon.
Yeah, that was weird.
It's really weird,
It's
which
strange.
makes me think it's maybe more serious than they want to let on.
I think that is the real answer. Is we'll see what's going on with Saquon Barkley. He said after the game that he was fine. It was a minor thing.
But he wouldn't clarify what it was.
No. And
how long
the Eagles were strange about it. He didn't come back in after he took the hit from Minkah Fitzpatrick. He came back in after halftime. That's something to watch, because obviously I think the complexion of this team changes drastically if Saquon's not
part
available.
of it. Absolutely.
Shout out Kenny Gainwell. He was fantastic against Pittsburgh, but I still think this is a much different team. But having said that, okay, because you can say injury for anybody, right?
Sure.
I just want to throw this out there.
Okay.
I will not be gaslit by the Philadelphia Eagles, because again, I said this last week to Peter Schrager. This was drama of their creation.
Yeah.
Nobody made AJ say that stuff. Nobody's made Brandon Graham say that stuff.
This is exactly the conversation I want to have right now. You're so right.
I will not be gaslit into this being my fault. And look, all I'm going to say, and you're right, it's not a quantifiable thing, but if I'm worried about the Eagles for some reason, it's just that every time things get a little bit tight in Philadelphia, things have a way of spiraling a little bit.
Right.
Close win against Cleveland all the way back earlier in the year. Nick Sirianni chirping at the fans, had to apologize to his own fan base. It happens with the players this time. More often than not, they overcome it, and credit to them.
Right.
They're
that
a
was my thing. Against
fantastic
the Steelers,
football team.
Didn't seem to matter.
I don't know if it will matter.
Right.
But if I had to pinpoint something that I've got my eye on, it's just the fact that things get a little bit noisy and a little bit messy every single time the script isn't going according to plan.
You're so right, though, because they were like, oh, is this what the media wanted to see? It's like, we weren't the ones that brought it up in the first place. Your teammate brought it up, put it out there publicly, and now you're gonna blame us?
Doesn't it also, I mean, they're so good, right? AJ Brown he's a cheat code. Yeah. His size and explosiveness on those, like throwing a slant to AJ Brown is an unguardable play.
Yeah, no matter what.
doesn't it feel a little on the nose to target him and have 290 passing yards? Like, you can't convince me that stuff wasn't in the back of their mind when they designed the game plan here. And I know Saquon's injury probably had something to do with it, but everything from the game plan to everybody's commentary after the game, it seemed to say, see, don't y'all look dumb? I'm like, guys, this was a situation of your making.
Right.
Not us.
Right.
We had nothing to do with this.
The fact that manufactured motivation had to happen. Like, think about like what we know about Nick Sirianni. Like, again, you just brought it up. He was chirping his own fan base. He was chirping that's not the first time either that he's chirped at the fans or done whatever. Like, he is absolutely the petty type to then like overblow this whole thing, to then turn it and say, look at the media's against us, blah, 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 and manufacture that motivation to make sure that it doesn't affect things on the field. And listen, if that's what works for your team, if that's how you manage these kind of off the field personalities, situations, dynamics, all of that kind of stuff, it clearly worked against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So like, whatever you need to do, but I will caution that method is volatile. And it can very easily go off the rails the other way.
That's a great way to put it. And yeah, maybe this team just is wired to want and need that chip on their shoulder. Yeah. And that's fine. All I'm saying is, until the hay is safely in the barn,
right,
and the Eagles get where they want to go, which is back to the Super Bowl, that makes me nervous. That's all I'm saying. It doesn't
trusting them.
It doesn't even make me nervous, because I've been saying for weeks I think the Eagles might be the best team in the NFL. It's just something I've got my eye on. Yeah. And if this season somehow goes sideways, I won't be surprised if it is somehow related to the sheer amount of personality on this team.
It's interesting because it's a total juxtaposition from the other NFC teams we just talked about in the Detroit Lions. Like, the vibes in Detroit are the reason that I believe in them and trust them wholeheartedly to figure it out despite the rash of injuries. If the Philadelphia Eagles were dealing with the kinds of injuries that the Detroit Lions are, I'm absolutely not trusting this team whatsoever. And like, the vibes are the reason I don't fully trust the Philadelphia Eagles, because like it's too, you can see it. You can see like the difference in both of these teams. Again, not a quantifiable thing, but it's why I'm like cautioning Lions fans off the edge. And meanwhile, with Eagles fans, I'm like, yeah, on the field, y'all are great. But there's like this little thing that's keeping me from trusting you 100%. And it's just the exact opposite situation for both of these teams.
I can't speak for an entire massive fan base, but I have a feeling Eagles fans like it this way, though. You know, like the attitude.
They're a volatile fan base.
The attitude, the chippiness, the us against the world mentality. I think it suits the Eagles. And before you come for us, Eagles fans, again, if we're talking about a concern for a contender, yours is not quantifiable.
It's not quantifiable, and it's splitting hairs.
So
it's splitting hairs.
I'd say we both feel very good about the Philadelphia Eagles, even if they do like to keep it a little bit spicy. Let's flip over to the AFC. Both very real, very non-hard to quantify concerns for the two AFC contenders. We'll start with the Chiefs. We already talked with Jay Glazer about Patrick Mahomes' ankle injury. Obviously, it's low-hanging fruit to say, I'm concerned about the health of the best quarterback in the NFL.
Can I say something?
Of course you can.
I'm not.
Are you joining Jay Glazer in the idea that he's not going to miss any time?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
This happens every single year.
Okay,
this happens every year. Patrick Mahomes deals with an ankle injury this time.
Cool.
Single year.
You walked right into my trap, because it's low-hanging fruit to talk about Patrick Mahomes' ankle. Like, we know he can power through that. We know he can win a Super Bowl on a bad ankle because he's already done it. Let's talk about what helped create that ankle injury.
Yeah.
Because Patrick Mahomes might be superhuman and capable of playing through anything, but is his offensive line going to give him a chance to play the role of Superman? Because, Carmen, you know better than anybody, it gets swept under the rug with all the success the Chiefs have had, but they played a Super Bowl with a bad offensive line, and it did not go so well for them. So
sure didn't.
Specifically, the left tackle spot in Kansas City is a very real concern regardless of Patrick Mahomes' health. Can I share some stats with you?
Of course you can.
Kansas City has arguably the best interior trio of offensive linemen in the league. Joe Thuney,
Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith. Yes.
Incredible. The Chiefs have allowed 70 pressures off left tackle this year from a variety of guys that have tried their hand at the job.
Yeah.
The trio, the center trio, the 2 guard spots in the center spot, 96 pressures combined between the 3 of them.
Yeah.
The left tackle spot is accounting for half of the pressure that's coming off of Patrick Mahomes in this season. And the pressure percentage coming off of left tackle, according to Next Gen Stats, is 12%. That's bottom 10 out of all offensive line positions in the NFL. So do the math, 32 times 5. I can't even do that in my head, but they're bottom 10.
Yeah.
That is a problem, regardless of how good Patrick Mahomes is.
No. You like when you were asking me if I was concerned about like Patrick Mahomes' ankle. No, I'm not, because Pat can absolutely deal with it. We've seen him fight through pain like that before. But you're right. The offensive line, specifically the tackle positions. And what they tried to do this last week was put Joe Thuney then at left tackle. And I'm never a fan of putting more guys out of position than need to be out of position. Like, if you're going to move him to left tackle, that means you're slotting someone else in at guard. And again, breaking up the strength of that offense. And especially when you're a guy like Patrick Mahomes, you can count on the interior. So you're aware at this point, especially, now we're going into week 16 or about to, Patrick Mahomes knows the weaknesses on his offensive line. He knows, to look out for outside pressure coming off the edges. But what he doesn't know is interior pressure at this point, which you just outlined so beautifully. So putting Joe Thuney out of position, I don't love in any stretch. And you're right. This offensive line has been not good. And the fact that the Chiefs haven't learned their lesson when it comes to the offensive line it's kind of unfathomable in a lot of ways. But they've allowed 35 sacks this year on Patrick Mahomes, who can get himself out of trouble too. So like, that's something that needs to be taken with an even bigger grain of salt. That's the 14th most in the NFL with a quarterback that knows how to get himself away from pressure.
What if Thuney is legitimately the best option? And maybe they signed DJ Humphries, who just hadn't played a whole lot of football before he got to KC. He's been banged up. His one start so far this season did not go swimmingly. What if
he's old too?
What if it needs to be Thuney?
Yeah,
that might have to be the solution.
I mean, that's the only reason that you did that. And I guess there's growing pains in that, and hopefully you get the 1 seed and you get the bye and you get to be able to figure it all out if you're the Kansas City Chiefs. But that is concerning. Honestly, what concerns me even more than the offensive line, though, there are multiple things with this defense in Kansas City that...
Oh, you have others.
I have other concerns.
Oh.
I sure do.
Okay.
Because you look at Kansas City this year, infamously playing almost exclusively 1-score games. And it's a combination of, yes, like their offense is just not as productive as it has been, but it's also because their defense is giving up more points than it has. And you look at, especially in this is a fun thing. Coming into this last week against the Cleveland Browns, the Kansas City Chiefs ranked 28th in takeaways. They only had 10.
Playing Jameis will help those numbers a little bit, won't they?
You want to know what they have now?
Please.
16 takeaways. Now they rank 15th in the league. But it's a little bit of a fool's gold kind of thing.
That'll goose the numbers a little bit.
It boosts the numbers playing Jameis Winston, turns out. And I'm more inclined to be concerned about this still, because leading into week 15, you only have 10 takeaways as a defense. You're only giving your offense that many more possessions. Like, that is something that we got used to seeing out of Spags' defense too, is being able to give the offense these extra possessions. So that adds to their ability to score points, to be more productive, to do all of that kind of stuff. When you do have Patrick Mahomes, you want the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands as much as humanly possible if you're the Kansas City Chiefs. That's not something this defense has been able to do. And they haven't been able to generate a ton of pressure up front. Chris Jones, we know how much of a game wrecker he can be. Guess what? So does every other team. So outside of Chris Jones is an 18.4% pass rush win percentage, which ranks 10th in the league. Myles Garrett, Trey Hendrickson, they're in the mid-20s just for reference. So Chris Jones is still kind of, lacking.
It's harder on an interior lineman than an edge, though.
That, and he's getting doubled a lot more.
Well, yeah, of course, yeah.
But the next highest on the team is Josh Uche at 18%. After that, it goes down to George Karlaftis at a 10.6% pass rush win percentage. Nobody else has higher than 10%. That's not good. Chris Jones is not getting a whole lot of help along that defensive front. The pressure percentage, they're very average when it comes to pressure rate in general. And that's because there's nobody outside of Chris Jones that you're afraid of along that defensive line at this point. And I know George Karlaftis leads the team in sacks. He's fine as a complimentary pass rusher. But the tandem of him and Josh Uche just hasn't been, I think, what the Kansas City Chiefs have needed up front. And that's manifested in the fact that, yes, they don't have takeaways because they're not getting the pressure that's leading to the errant throws, that's doing all that kind of stuff. That's where I'm concerned a little bit. And that's what's keeping the Kansas City Chiefs, I think, in these one-score games more than the offense.
Speaking of things that you don't know how to quantify, I don't know exactly how to say this, but how when we talk about Patrick Mahomes, people love to say he just has that innate ability to get what he needs. If it's 3rd and 6, he's going to get 7. If it's 3rd and 10, he's going to get 11.
Right.
I feel that way about the Kansas City defense. I've got no number to back me up. I have nothing.
Okay, fair.
But the Kansas City Chiefs are incredible at getting the exact number that they need for Patrick Mahomes to get more. Yeah. If Pat needs 19 to win, they'll hold you to 17. If you get into a game like the Super Bowl a couple years ago, they'll allow 35, but Pat will get you 38. I trust Steve Spagnuolo to come up with a game plan that is going to put Patrick Mahomes in a position to win the game because they've been doing it for years at this point.
Well, and they've done it all season with these one-score games.
My only concern is when Pat has the ball with the chance to win the game, can his offensive line give him the time that he needs to do it? Because by hook or by crook, Steve, it's like wizardry. Steve Spagnuolo will be like, okay, do we score 17 today? Then we'll hold them to 16. If we score 38 today, then we'll hold them to 36. By and large, they can do that. But I can't help but think about that Super Bowl you were at, where without any offensive tackles, he had no chance because even Superman needs a little bit of help in some form or fashion.
And to be fair, though, Spags' defense gave up 31 points.
After holding their own for as long as they could, because the Chiefs' offense didn't score a touchdown in that game.
They didn't. That's true.
That game, it was within reach until late. And eventually it just...
end of the third quarter.
Is that not late in a game?
Right.
We're splitting hairs here. The point is, I'm extremely nervous about an offensive line that has let Patrick Mahomes get hit 37 times in the last 3 weeks.
Well, then, yeah, and then that's when the ankle injury creeps up because he's not able to get himself away from danger.
Joe Tooney, get some sets coming off the left side, my guy. Get to work on that stance.
I still think we're far from me putting Pat Mahomes' face on Ralphie from The Simpsons, going I'm in danger. It's no,
Pat Mahomes should never be in the Ralphie situation. He's still him.
Right.
But
right.
We gotta do something about this turnstile of a left tackle position in Kansas City. All right, let's wrap it up. The Buffalo Bills. I don't think this one is any mystery, much like the Detroit Lions. It's funny, talking about how everybody was holding a funeral for the Lions. Because the Bills have Josh Allen and because they looked so fun on offense, it doesn't feel like enough people are talking about how beat to hell the Buffalo Bills are themselves. I mean, goodness, they got to get healthy. That's their concern. Rasul Douglas, Taylor Rapp, DeMar Hamlin all missed Sunday's game. During the game, Matt Milano just got back from his bicep injury. He's out. Fellow linebacker Dorian Williams also got hurt. It's a problem. And much like the Lions, at some point you start to wonder how much of it is sustainable. Fortunately for the Bills, it does sound like some of these guys will be back sooner rather than later. But I'd like to get them back soon enough to have at least a week or two in the regular season to kind of get their rhythm and their chemistry back before the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm a little less worried about the Bills because like they played a majority of the season already without Matt Milano. Granted, during that time they did have Rasul Douglas or they did have DeMar Hamlin, and if you have all of those guys out, that's a concern. And then like if you don't have your other linebackers too, but we've seen the Bills outperform expectations all season, even with dealing with injury, with dealing with losses as far as, the offense, Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs leaving, all that other stuff. We've seen this team outperform expectations all season long. So I fully expect that that's going to happen, especially when you have Josh Allen, who can score you 40 plus points a game. The Bills are averaging 31.8 points per game. That's 1 point below the Detroit Lions. But obviously this game went the other way, and the Bills got out to a really great start and just kind of had a lead that they just kept, getting out in front of with the Lions. I think a lot of that has to do with their run game. So when you have an offense that can outscore, giving up 42 points, like more than 42 points in the last couple of games, is less concerning for me down the stretch, especially when you're going to get some guys back.
Getting the guys back is what gives me optimism. I just wanted to point out a quarter of their explosive gains against the pass have come in the last 2 games. They're a very respectable middle of the pack when it comes to allowing explosive passes, but they've given up 20 in the last calendar week, really. That's not sustainable. I know, I get it. Rasul Douglas is expected back. Right. Rapp and Hamlin will be in there. I feel okay about it, but you make a playoff run, you will be playing teams that can take advantage of that.
I'll tell you what does concern me, and it's been a concern for me all year with the Bills, is their run defense. It hasn't been good. They rank 27th in EPA per play allowed.
People are just very quietly forgetting how badly the Ravens ran the ball down their throats. Yeah. Yes. And I know it was a while ago.
Especially when you're looking at, outside of the Chiefs, when you're looking at teams that you would play into the playoffs, even in the Super Bowl, all of them have great run games. And that's something that is really concerning when you would I think it's also kind of masked by the fact that they've forced 4 fumbles on the ground. And so you think, okay, maybe this run defense isn't so bad, but on a per play basis, which is what matters when you're talking about teams like the Ravens or like the Philadelphia Eagles, who they could meet in the Super Bowl, or, or the Lions, if that were to, happen. And, I know David Montgomery's not there. That's concerning to me down the stretch and into the playoffs. If you're talking about what our biggest concern is for contenders, which would technically take us all the way up to the Super Bowl, that is one of mine.
Yeah. Even allowing for injuries, because some of those guys only missed the Lions game. Some of these injured guys played against the Rams.
Right.
And it was not good,
no.
Obviously. So just purely getting good health, I don't think is a cure-all when you're talking about going against the likes of the Ravens, or, obviously it would be a great problem to have to play the Lions again, because it means you're in the Super Bowl.
Right.
But you get into those types of games, I think it's nervous. So let's wrap this up. I didn't think about this at all. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Uh-oh.
But having just listed all these concerns off, rank how you feel about these 4 from most confident to least.
That's so hard.
I know. That's why I'm doing it.
God.
Content,
are you making
baby.
me do this first because you don't want to do it yourself?
I'll do it first if you want me to.
No, it's fine. Let's see. I'm probably most confident in the Chiefs.
Sure. Just the been there, done that factor.
Yeah.
Okay.
If we're talking all the way to the Super Bowl.
Okay.
Once the postseason starts, yeah. and then the Eagles,
Okay. Yeah.
and then the Bills, and then the Lions. I really am. I mean, the injury is like, as much as like we talked about Aaron Glenn performing miracles this year so far, and he has. I mean,
It's a lot.
it's a lot.
It's a
It's
lot.
too much. It's so many holes to cover up at this point, and you don't have a good timetable on a lot of these guys. Like, whereas like we were talking about, the Bills are going to get guys back. The Lions very well couldn't.
Fair.
Or could not get guys back. So I think it goes Chiefs, just because Chiefs, which I know is groundbreaking analysis there. But I'm in the big picture. I promised myself after last year,
You're not.
I promised myself
gonna
I would
doubt
not
the
bet
Chiefs.
against them.
Okay.
I will not. I will never doubt them, especially when it comes into the playoff time. So it's Chiefs, Eagles, Bills, Lions.
I'm close. I would go Eagles, Chiefs, Bills, Lions. And just purely like the Eagles have less roster concerns. They're playing better football.
Yeah.
I'm not doubting the Chiefs if I have them second, but like how you're actually playing should still matter.
Yeah.
And the Eagles are playing better football than the Chiefs are, even if the Chiefs are 13-1. Would I be shocked if it's a rematch of the Super Bowl 2 years ago? Absolutely, I would not. I'll go Eagles, Chiefs, Bills, Lions.
Yeah, okay.
Now we
Okay with
just
that.
wait to see.
This could age so poorly.
It really, like, it sitting here a week or so before Christmas, it feels very likely that the Super Bowl will be comprised of two of these four teams.
Mhm.
But as soon as you say that, that's when it gets goofy. So
I was going to say the margin for error in the NFC is so small. We didn't even talk about the Ravens in the AFC.
didn't talk about the Ravens, didn't talk
Talk
about
the
Steelers. The LA Rams very quietly sitting in the cut. Just
We didn't talk about the
asking-
Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, there's still time in the season. These are topics for another time. For now, we wanted to focus on the top seeds, and that's what we did. Speaking of the Minnesota Vikings, they did play football on Monday night.
They played football. The Chicago Bears did
Listen,
something.
4 teams played football on Monday night. We had a doubleheader to wrap up Week 15, and I think the Minnesota Vikings were the only team that played something resembling football. And honestly, I didn't even think this was a great Vikings game, but I don't say that to be critical. I kind of appreciate the way it was almost like watching, like you play horse against your little brother,
Yeah.
or like a dad plays horse against his son. Like they just let the Bears make all the mistakes. Like the
Yeah.
Vikings were like, we're just gonna be smart and let you goof up enough that we'll take advantage of it. And without really getting out of like second gear, the Vikings beat the Bears 30-12.
Yeah. No, it wasn't impressive, but it also was just kind of like, yeah, I mean,
It didn't
yes.
need to be.
It
Like,
didn't, right, exactly.
Let's get in, and half of their points came off of Bears mistakes, early turnover on downs, early turnover. Like they had short field several times. Just cash in on the opportunities that the Bears
I think
hand
as
you.
soon as, because the Bears right from jump started going forward on fourth down. They were trying to be aggressive. They were trying to set some type of tone, and Minnesota was like, sure, well, go ahead, try. And then it didn't work out for them because Brian Flores, and that's all they needed to do. They just, like you said, kind of let the Bears make mistakes, capitalized on them, had a few really fun catches and throws to Justin Jefferson there, and that was about it.
Not the cleanest game of Sam Darnold's season.
No, I feel like in the third quarter, he kind of like there were some issues there coming out of halftime.
But again, I don't know. It's late in the year. Everybody's beat up. You're playing in the division. This is the second time you've seen the Bears. Just do what it takes. And if you play a meh game and you win by 18 points,
right,
I'm perfectly okay with that.
That leads me to something then that I want to ask you.
Okay.
For the conversation we just had, top 2 seeds in each conference, contenders, whatever. Like, I'm fine with that, but I think in the general playoff conversation and in the conversation about the NFC in particular, the Vikings continually are an afterthought, despite only having 2 losses. Like, what is it about the Vikings that no one is really taking seriously on a national level, or like, what's it gonna take for us to consider these guys a contender.
Okay, for starters, and I think you have a point,
Okay.
but here on the NFL on Fox podcast,
Yeah.
we have been very pro Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, I was talking
have been,
generically.
Sure.
I've been very
Okay.
high on the Minnesota Vikings since
As-
before training camp.
As long as we're clear that this has been a pro Vikings pod since probably early October.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you making that. I very infamously before the season was like, the Vikings aren't going to be a bad team.
To answer your question, I think it is the quote unquote unknown commodity at quarterback. Sam Darnold
Right.
has been great this year, but it's just a 1 year sample size.
Yes.
There's until he just shuts everybody up beyond a shadow of a doubt, there's always going to be a segment of people that are waiting for the other shoe to drop. On top of that, they lost to the Lions. It was a close, fantastic game, but they lost to the
Yes.
Lions.
They
And
will get another shot.
they will. Well, and so to answer your question, the most important thing about this, the Vikings kept pace with the Lions. They're tied on record. It's just tiebreaker that separates them.
Right.
I mean, look, the Seahawks, Packers, Lions, if the Vikings can set up a winner-take-all sort of game with Detroit, or depending on what happens with Detroit, just outright take the division, maybe even before then, you got no chance but to take them seriously. Like, the Vikings can still get everything.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
it's not
That's
all
why
in their control, but they could get the bye.
We're
They
going
could
into
get the
week
division.
16, and the 1 seed is in play for the Minnesota Vikings, and I feel like we're like they're just such an afterthought of the playoff conversation.
Well, I think the Lions have been so dominant. We talked about it. Like, they
Right.
had all those like 50 to whatever wins. And also the Lions made the NFC title game, probably should have made it to the Super Bowl last year. So people have those priors to fall back on.
Right.
Whereas this Vikings team kind of came out of nowhere. Again, we've never seen Sam Darnold play football this well for this prolonged of a stretch of time. So that's the answer. But I take this Vikings team very seriously. I know you know this, but to those of you listening, the Vikings point differential is 4th best in the league.
Yes. And it has
Detroit,
been
Philly, and Buffalo are the only teams
for a
with a better
sizable
point
chunk
differential.
of the season. The top 3 teams in the NFC North led the entire league in point differential, and Minnesota was as high as was leading the league at
It's
one point.
It's very funny. And to be clear, it's all still out there for the Vikings. They don't need to convince anybody. They could just go take the NFC North. But even if they don't, even if the Vikings finish as second in the division and they're the 5 seed in the playoffs, it's very funny to think a couple years ago, they were a 13-win team. I think they were the 3 seed that year.
Mm-hmm.
They were a 3 seed that absolutely nobody was afraid of. The Giants went into their house and took their lunch money. This year, they could be a wild card that you should not
Absolutely don't want to play
any part of.
Yes.
So it's funny to think how things change.
How things change. Will stay the same, but change.
I take this team very seriously.
I do
Like
too.
the defense is ferocious. Darnold's had his share of ups and downs, but by and large, he's been much more good than bad. The weapons on offense are fantastic. Like this team is built to win games in the playoffs.
That's the difference from a few years ago, is that Brian Flores is now the defensive coordinator versus Ed Donatel. And I just want to share real quick something funny that I noticed in this game against the Bears. Not that we need to dive any more into that.
I don't know how much. Do we want to spend time on the Bears?
Not really.
Okay.
You can look at defensive groupings on Next Gen Stats in real time. The Vikings used how many? 8 different defensive groupings. They had almost 40% of their defensive snaps without a defensive lineman on the field. Like a down lineman, a guy, like a defensive tackle. It was all linebackers and edge rushers.
Going back to our previous conversation, maybe Aaron Glenn should study some Vikings tape.
I mean,
as he tries to figure out what to do.
Different schemes. I don't know that he has the personnel available to him.
It was
However,
facetious.
I know. But and by contrast, the Bears used 3. 64 of their 71 snaps were were in nickel, so they weren't even spending a lot of time in base. They had one other play at the goal line, I think, in a different formation. But 8 different defensive groupings for the Minnesota Vikings under Brian Flores. Like that's just it's hilarious. Like just seeing the personnel that he's trotting out there, and like how are you supposed to set protections to that when you have all edge rushers in front of you? Who's the Mike at that point when you have 6 backers on the field? It's hilarious. And Brian Flores is a madman, and that's the difference in this Vikings team and why I think we're taking them seriously.
I'm getting ahead of myself, but you start looking at teams the Vikings could wind up playing. Like Baker Mayfield will throw you some interceptions. Like you can confuse. You can do some stuff there. So Matthew Stafford, you can put pressure on the Rams offensive line. We've seen it. If the protection's not good, you can get after the Rams.
Did decently well against them earlier in the season.
That's fair. Why you got to derail my narrative?
I'm sorry.
Like that? Point is, I think the Vikings are a team that can. I've said this already. Like I said, I'll beat the drum for the Vikings. They can win playoff games with an S. I really do believe that
too. I believe that too. I wanted to know what it's going to take for the larger audience and media to catch up with us.
Don't really want to dwell on the Bears looking like the Bears again. It is, maybe I bit off more than I could chew thinking that the Bears could be a playoff team this year. But even if they didn't make the playoffs, which they obviously won't, they're mathematically eliminated. I didn't see this Bears team gunning for a top 10 pick once again.
This is why I said over and over again this offseason and into this season that, like, let's not put the cart in front of the horse. I just want to see that the vision is working. I want to see Caleb Williams get incrementally better every week. I want to see that there's a plan. I want them to get to a winning record before we start talking postseason and all of these expectations. I tried so hard and got so far.
But in the end, it didn't even matter.
It didn't even matter because everybody yelled at me for not having high enough expectations in the beginning of the season. And now I'm like, look, I've watched this team my whole life. You need to show me something before I'm going to believe. And I'm well within my rights to not be sold on this team until they can prove to me that they're changed.
You deserve all the victory laps because I don't know.
I don't take pleasure in it. I was hoping it was going to work out. I was just like, I need to see it first before I'm going to believe it. This is not a Santa Claus thing with Christmas coming up. It's not a believing is seeing thing. No, I need to see it.
Well, what I see is 8 straight losses for the Chicago Bears and another
ties the second longest streak in history.
Season. Let's get to the second game. We don't have to spend as much time on it. Just a total slap fight between the Atlanta Falcons and the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, I just wanted to see Desmond Ridder have a chance to go against the Falcons. And you know what? He almost did it.
I know. You were chanting Legacy Drive on like the last 2 or 3 Raiders drives. You were chanting Desmond Ridder Legacy Drive.
This was a forgettable football game for most of the time, but Desmond Ridder, I'll never forget. I'll tell you this. I'll never forget ever Desmond Ridder converting a 4th and 8 with the game on the line by throwing behind the sticks, but behind the line of scrimmage.
I was going to say
not behind the sticks, behind the line of scrimmage. And they picked it up. That summarizes where the Atlanta Falcons are so well.
Yeah, it's true.
That Desmond Ridder threw a check down on 4th and 8 and the Falcons let them convert
it. Yeah.
Obviously, Atlanta picks Ridder off in the end zone to win 15-9 in Vegas. I don't know what to say. This game was stinky. It's funny to think some weird stuff happened in this game. Like the Falcons got away with a terrible roughing the passer call on Robert Spillane that the Raiders could have won this game in a different manner had that not gotten flagged. The main takeaway, though, is like, I guess officially the Falcons keep themselves alive in the NFC South race by winning. Yeah. And they do have the tiebreaker on the Bucs, but what about this team?
No.
Looks like someone you should be taking seriously.
Absolutely nothing. 11 of 17 for 112 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. I just read off Kirk Cousins' stat line.
Let's talk about Kirk because I'm not imagining things. He started a little slow coming off the Achilles, but like he had a stretch
a week, though. But then he had a stretch.
He had a stretch of really good football.
Especially because we were comparing and contrasting him to Aaron Rodgers about like had the, coming back from the injury, and who knew that it was going to be Kirk who had suffered the injury later that was going to come back and look fine. And literally after the first couple of weeks of the season, he looked good.
240-2 against Philly in week 2. Obviously, he had the 500-yard night against Tampa.
Yeah, he
276
looks like a Hall of Famer against Tampa.
again against Tampa. 300 against New Orleans in a sloppy game. Obviously, they wound up getting crushed by Minnesota last week, but he threw for 344 that day. It's crazy the fall off, and like it makes you wonder. Look, the Raiders have given up 240 or more passing yards in their last 6 games prior to Monday, and Kirk Cousins
could only manage 112.
112, dude. Like, it's totally valid to wonder, is it only the contract that is keeping the Falcons from trying Michael Penix Jr.? Is it just the bad optics of paying a guy $180 million and benching him 14 games later? Because like the play does not justify it.
No.
It just doesn't.
No. And you just wonder what it is. Like, what's not working? You have Bijan Robinson. You have Drake London.
They ran for 168 yards.
Yes. Like, what is it and like their line isn't bad.
He just looks slow and beat up, man.
I know. And like, I've been more focused, I think, with the Atlanta Falcons specifically on their defense because I just don't trust them. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's a Raiders team that has had to start Desmond Ridder. Say what you want about the Las Vegas Raiders, but I mean, the Falcons held them to 9 points. So like, how is this not looking better? It's just, they're not a team that you should take seriously. They shouldn't actually contend for the NFC South. And the crazy part is that they have the tiebreaker over the Buccaneers, who demolished the LA Chargers.
The Buccaneers
hung 40 on them.
The Buccaneers cannot afford to take their foot off the gas. Because also, by the way, look, I know the Falcons just escaped the Raiders by the skin of their teeth, so we're not taking anything for granted. But the Falcons' next 3 games are the Giants, the Commanders, and the Panthers. The Bucs cannot afford to let up, because if you let this team sneak past you back into the playoffs, that's going to be a disappointing finish.
The Bucs do have a pretty easy slate the rest of the way too. They got the Cowboys next.
Cowboys, Panthers, Saints. Yeah,
Panthers, Saints,
the Bucs actually have an easier finish to the season. But just saying, write this team off at your own risk, because they have the tiebreaker over you. But we've spent too much time on one of the more forgettable games of the 2024 NFL season.
This was some Thursday night stuff.
This was for the sickos, as I like to say.
This entire slate was for the sickos. But I guess that's the trade-off. We've been getting really good Thursday night football, and like Monday night, there's been a couple of Monday night slates that have just been like, ugh.
This was certainly one of those. Thank you. Thank you for helping me get through it, Carmen.
You're welcome.
That just about wraps up week 15, but not before we dive into these power rankings. Take a look at how the league stacks up with just 3 games left on the schedule. It just flies by in the blink of an eye. We're already getting to Christmas in the last 3 weeks of the season. Let's start at the bottom like we typically do. Every time we've talked about the Jets this season, it's typically been something bad. I'm going to shout them out up 3 spots to number 27. Yeah, it's darkly ironic and funny that Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams finally played like the guys from 2020 after the Jets were mathematically eliminated. But as a fan of both of their games, it was still fun and cool to see them turn back the clock and ball out to beat the Jags. Like, that was a fun 15 minutes when those teams were going up and down the field. And I will say, I'm asking for too much. Like, just by even putting this into the universe, it won't happen. But if Rodgers and Devontae play like that, they've got the Bills next week. They could be a huge fly in the ointment for the entire playoff picture if they can do that one more time this season. So that's something to look forward to, at least. Up at number 22, up 4 spots. The Dallas Cowboys are not going to make the postseason. It's a minute chance mathematically, but they have won 3 of the last 4. They were 3-7. They'd been blown out back-to-back weeks, looking dead in the water, looking about as hopeless a franchise in the league. Just give them credit for playing competent strong complementary football for most of the last month. I mean, that Bengals game did still happen, but they crushed the Panthers on Sunday afternoon. And what does make this interesting is just Mike McCarthy's future. The guy needs a new contract. The Cowboys are rallying him around him. Is Jerry Jones going to be willing to sign McCarthy to a new deal if he overcomes all of this turmoil to get them to an 8 or 9 win season? I don't know the answer, but I'm morbidly curious to find out. Let's keep it in Texas at number 14, up 1 spot. The Texans did not look all that great offensively anyway against Miami, but it led me to question, maybe that's just not who Houston is this year. Maybe instead of wondering what's wrong with CJ Stroud in the offense, we should just be appreciating that this defense is plenty capable of leading Houston to a win. They get takeaways, they get sacks, they get pressure. Will Anderson is a beast. Derek Stingley had a coming out party. I wouldn't bet on the Texans against some of the heavyweights in the AFC, but that defense is capable of making life difficult. Maybe instead of focusing on why the offense isn't more fun, let's take a minute to appreciate how strong this Houston defense has been for most of the year. Up at number 11, up 2 spots, the LA Rams. How can you not be romantic about football? The Rams beat the Bills on Sunday of week 14 by scoring 44 points. Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp. It's as fun and beautiful as offensive football can look. They get the win. 4 days later, they play one of the ugliest games of the year. They don't score a touchdown and also get the win. There's no one way to do it. You can win a football game in 500,000 different stupid ways. And I appreciate the LA Rams doing it on opposite ends of the spectrum in the same 4-day stretch. They're on top of the NFC West. They don't look like a team you want to play because the defense can do that, hold your opponent to 6 points. And you know what the offense can do when they're not playing in a rainstorm. I like the Rams. Finishing it up, the top of this thing looks very similar. I don't think we need to go into a whole lot of detail about it, but down at number 8, down 2 spots, the Steelers did not meet the moment against the Eagles on Sunday. I dropped them below Baltimore, which I felt gross doing because they did just beat the Ravens head to head. But I don't know, man, especially with George Pickens and that hamstring injury, I don't trust that there's enough there on offense for the Steelers to really hang with the big boys. Definitely not multiple times in a row like you would have to do in the playoffs, but they get a chance to shut me up on Saturday. They get to play the Ravens again. So I like the Ravens more right now. How could you not after Lamar got his mojo back, threw 5 touchdowns against the Giants, but not going to be surprised if the Steelers find a way to drag them down into the mud again. Plenty of opportunity left to prove themselves as legit. Baltimore followed by Kansas City. It's all still out there for you, Steelers. So don't be too mad at me for dropping you down to number 8. That does it for the power rankings. That does it for the show. We will be back like we always are on Thursday. Week 16 is on deck. We got some big Saturday games. We got a loaded Sunday schedule. And then we're on to the holidays with 2 games on Christmas. I'm getting ahead of myself, though. Make sure you're here on Thursday as we preview Week 16. Subscribe to the show if you're not. It's on Spotify. Go find it on Apple Podcasts. Really, wherever you want to get your pods, you can find it there. We will see y'all on Thursday. As always, love doing this show. I love talking to y'all. Hope you enjoy it as well. I appreciate it, and I'll talk to you soon.